The John List Murders, a true horror story. Sometimes, the scariest stories aren't about ghosts or monsters. Sometimes the true horror is a human being who walks among us smiling, polite, and ordinary, until one day, they reveal the darkness inside. In 1971, a man named John List turned his beautiful New Jersey mansion into a house of death. He murdered his entire family, disappeared, and lived in hiding for nearly 18 years before being caught. This isn't just a true crime case, it's a real-life horror story. John, the perfect father. Or so it seemed. John List appeared to be the model of respectability. A devout Lutheran, a veteran of World War II and the Korean War, and an accountant who seemed to value faith, family, and tradition above all else. He lived with his wife, Helen, their 3 children, Patricia, John Jr., and Frederick, and his elderly mother, Alma, in a sprawling 19-room Victorian mansion in Westfield, New Jersey. To neighbors, the Lists seemed like the perfect suburban family. The mansion itself symbolized success and prosperity. But inside those walls, things were far from perfect. Helen suffered from illness and struggled with alcohol. Patricia, their teenage daughter, was determined to pursue acting, a dream her father condemned as sinful. His son John Jr. cared more about athletics than academics, another disappointment in his father's eyes. And behind it all, John himself was unraveling. By 1971, he had lost his job. Financial ruin loomed over him, but his pride and obsession with appearances meant he refused to admit the truth to anyone. He pretended to go to work every day, even as debt piled higher. To John, failure wasn't just personal, it was spiritual. He believed his family was straying from God, and that weighed heavily on him. The breaking point, in his own twist of logic, John convinced himself that the only way to save his family was to end their lives. He believed he could prevent them from falling away from their faith and ensure their souls would be safe in heaven. On the morning of November 9th, 1971, John put his plan into motion. With disturbing calmness, he murdered his wife, his mother, and later that day, each of his children as they returned home. The killings were carried out methodically, without hesitation. But what's most chilling is what came after. Instead of panic or regret, John seemed eerily composed. He carefully placed his family members in sleeping bags in the mansion's grand ballroom, lining them up as though preparing them for a grim funeral. His mother's body remained upstairs. Then he sat down and wrote a 5-page letter to his pastor, explaining what he had done. The words were cold, detached, almost businesslike. In his mind, this was not murder. It was salvation. But the horror didn't stop there. Before leaving, John turned on every light in the mansion, lowered the thermostat, and set the home's intercom system to play organ hymns that echoed through the vast, empty rooms. Neighbors would later describe the house as unnervingly bright, glowing at all hours, while inside, the only sounds were the faint, eerie strains of religious music drifting through the halls, playing to no one but the dead. After finishing his grim work, John calmly left the house. But before disappearing, he tied up every loose end. He stopped the mail, canceled deliveries, and even told his children's schools they would be away on vacation. To the outside world, nothing seemed wrong. Weeks passed. The mansion sat glowing in the night, but no one came or went. Finally, after nearly a month, neighbors grew suspicious. On December 7th, 1971, police entered the house. What they found was horrifying. The once grand ballroom had been transformed into a morgue. The bodies lay silently beneath sleeping bags. The house was silent, but for the faint echo of organ music still playing on a loop, the smell of decay clung to the air. It was as though time itself had stopped on the day John List walked out the door. Now it is the hunt for John List. But where was he? The killer father had vanished without a trace. Despite the horror inside the mansion, there was no sign of John. For nearly 18 years, he lived quietly under a false name, Robert Clark. He remarried, worked as an accountant, and lived what appeared to be an ordinary suburban life in Virginia and later Colorado. For nearly 2 decades, it was as if the murderer had simply melted into society, becoming someone's neighbor, someone's coworker, just another face in the crowd. Justice at last. But in 1989, the case was revived on the TV program America's Most Wanted. Forensic artist Frank Bender created an age-progressed bust of what John List might look like after so many years. The sculpture was eerily accurate, even down to the glasses he wore. Viewers who knew Robert Clark immediately recognized him. Within weeks, John List was arrested. After 18 years, the monster had finally been found. At his trial, John admitted to the killings but never expressed true remorse. He claimed it was all done to protect his family's souls. But to the jury, it was nothing more than a self-righteous excuse for an unimaginable act of evil. He was convicted of 5 counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison 5 consecutive life terms, 1 for each life he had taken. He spent the rest of his days behind bars until his death in 2008. But the mansion itself? That's where the story takes on an even darker twist. After the murders, the home stood silent. Locals reported strange sights and sounds, flickering lights, unexplained noises, even faint organ music drifting into the night. In 1972, just 1 year after the murders, the mansion burned down in a mysterious fire. Many believed the property was cursed, doomed from the moment John List spilled blood inside. Even today, stories linger. People claim the land itself holds onto the horror, that something about what happened there never truly left. The story of John List is one of the most chilling in American history. Not a monster from folklore, not a ghost in the shadows, but a father, a husband, a neighbor, who turned his home into a tomb. He thought he could hide from justice, that he could erase himself from the photographs, from the memory of the world. But the past always catches up, and the mansion where it all happened, though it no longer stands, its story is forever etched into the dark history of American suburbia, a reminder that the scariest monsters are often the ones who look the most ordinary. So next time you see the glow of a beautiful house late at night, ask yourself, what secrets could be hiding behind its doors?